Welcome to another video by your host, Shane McRetro. Today we're having a look at the Sega Saturn again. This time we're actually installing a, a Phantom Universal mod chip. So I've forgotten that I don't actually have the mod chip on me. Or any Kynar wire. Now I have both. So, Phantom Universal looks something like that. This one's date stamp, PCB's date stamp 2016, week 13. We're looking to make this fit into this, which we have identified the drive in a previous video, so we know which cable to use and everything. So first off I need to get some Kynar wire. It's not really the first step, but I'm doing it. So if you bought one of these and you opted to get Kynar wire, you'll have either really thin cable, which is known as 30 AWG, American wire gauge, or you'll have something 28 or 26. They're both fine to use with the 5 volt bit of the circuit. The problem is with thicker wire is that the thicker the wire, the more resistance it gets. The more resistance you have, the less likely the voltage is to make it all the way through to the mod chip, which would be very bad. You don't want that to happen. So, with that in mind, let's start pulling this apart. So, this is, well, it's a PAL Saturn with the grey buttons. It's a Model 2, not a Model 1. There's actually 15 or so revisions of the main boards in these. So, if you've watched the identifying your Sega Saturn video, where I pull apart and have a look at the CD drive, hopefully you'll know what you're doing to a degree. So first off, as always, remove these 5 screws. Make sure if you can that you're working in an anti-static proof area. For example, don't work on regular bubble wrap. This pink bubble wrap is anti-static, so it's good for that. It's soft, so it doesn't damage the lid of my Saturn because it doesn't sit very flat. So Sega didn't want you putting soft drinks on them, unlike the Nintendo Entertainment System, which was the best soft drink holder ever, really. Here, last screw. There is a screw there. So use a pretty thick flat blade if you've got it on that one. I don't actually know what size that is, but it's big. So once you've got all the screws out, don't let go. Turn it around, plop it back down, and just gently lift. But make sure you have no CD in the drive, because that's, well, as I said in the other video, bad news for everyone. So pop your lid out of the way, and your back cover will fall off. So have a look, feel free to dust a few things. Don't dust the laser itself, because that would be very bad for the laser. Or any of those gears, because if you put too much dust in those, they won't turn. Oh, that got up my nose. Oh, I'm breathing in 90s dust. Oh, someone save me. Alright, so here's the setup. So this particular model, we've got the cable running from the CD drive to the main board. We need the 20 pin cable for this because we are using a JVC drive. I've already identified this one as. So let's have a look at the mod chip. So there's a few things you need to do in preparation. This video will go through everything because that's how I do it. It's a lot easier for editing. So grab your 2 cables. So you get 2 cables in the kit. You only need one. You need to make sure you have your main board to CD drive 1 present. You can't get around not having that. Compare them. Line one edge up. You'll see one's a bit shorter than the other. If you have a JVC drive, you want the one that is slightly longer, which in my case is the one underneath. If you have a Sanyo drive, you will want the one that is slightly less wide, less girthy. So in my case, I don't need that, so that'll get tossed out. But, however, I do need this one, so I'm keeping that. Put it there. And first thing I'm going to do is remove this bit of tape that has been serving no purpose since probably a week after it was made. Thanks, cable. I mean, why would that have even been now? I mean, it's holding that down there. It's still got this terrible mess over here. Why don't I just make a different cable? It's fine. Doesn't matter. So, you'll want to have a soldering iron. I'm using a Hakko 888, which is probably overkill if you don't do soldering often. So 350 degrees where we're heading. If you've got you're best off using a 20 watt or 25 watt soldering iron if you can. Try to avoid the 60 watt ones. They're a bit overkill. And while that's heating up, you can just, if you haven't already, strip one of the ends of your cable. I'm using a little pair of wire strippers here that I picked up for cheap. They do all sorts of things. AWG 30 is 0.2 millimeters. 26 AWG is 0.4. So that's the difference there. Why can't we all be metric? No idea. But there we go. We've got one end of that cable strip, so you don't need much. It's only a couple of millimeters, really. All you need is enough to go on this pad. So look at the width of that pad and sort of work out that, you know, it doesn't need to be that long. So we're looking at the Modchip, we've got, so these are the 21 pin connectors which go to the JVC drives. These are the 20 pin connectors which go to the Sanyos. So we're not using a Sanyo, so we don't need to worry about those two. So ignore them, desolder them if you want. It will make no difference at all. I don't recommend desoldering them, don't do that, that's just overkill. But over here in this top corner we've got JVC and SYO. JVC is JVC drive and SYO is Sanyo. So we want to connect that middle pad to the pad on the whatever side that is, that side. And by doing that it will make the chip work with the JVC drive. So that's quite handy. So let's get some solder onto these pads and work out the wiring. Pretty fun. It's always a bit of guesswork, but if you have a look at it, you can sort of usually you can work it out. All right, so grab your solder. It can be 0.6 millimeter solder or 1 millimeter or 1.2. It doesn't really matter. I'm using whatever little scraps of solder I've just found in my toolbox when I cleaned up, so it'll work well. If you've got it, leaded solder is better. I understand not everyone lives in a reduction of hazardous substances area. Now, actually, before I do that, let's have a look at maybe how this will be positioned in the actual Saturn. Because once I know that, it does have two 5-volt pads. So if we can work out the best way to do this, so motherboard, so we want motherboard side to go toward the motherboard. That's good sense. So let's remove this cable. We just do a simple lift. So this is from the CD drive, okay. So if I were to just plug this into here, for example, make sure your pins are facing the right way. So in the Phantom Universal they need to face up to make contact. So usually it's the side with the blue text that has the actual pins, the other side doesn't have anything. It's actually got a bit of plastic covering it, you'll notice. And these two little locking clips, they're joined. That's one big thing all the way along that applies pressure. So go ahead and just wiggle that in and then lock down these two things. Actually, I'm not going to do that yet because I've got to work out how this fits. So let's pop this end in the main board. So the main board, you'll notice, has pins on one side or the other. Just match the cable with the way it goes. So I want the silver connectors to match where the silver connectors are. If it's double-sided, it may not actually have pins on both sides. You see already that's a terrible way to put it in. See, that's not a good way to put it in. So, we rejigger. We think, okay, that's back to front. Unless, oh, that won't work. So my pins need to be facing in from the CD drive. Always, if you get confused, take a step back and have a look at how your cable was positioned. You'll start to see where things belong. Okay, so take that off the main board, pop this one in here. That's very erect. And let's go with this one going in here. It's a bit more of an art than a science. So now if you see that doesn't work at all because that is facing the wrong way. Those pins would be going down instead of up. So that's ruled out. So it looks like the short cable has to live on the main board. Okay, fair enough. So now without a doubt we know that main board has to go on the short cable. So pop it back in. Lock down those locking connectors. Now you have part of the solution. Of course the 5 volts are all down this end now. That's fine. I'm not upset. Do I sound upset? I'm not upset. Ideally we want to have it nice looking. Let's just see where this puts us if we do this. That's kind of terrible too. Oh, it's already unlocked. What if we unfold this cable? It's a very long cable. And now it's upside down to the connector. Okay, that's fine. So it obviously needs to be that way around. Lock it in. There we go. You've just got to make it work. Maybe it needs more folds. There we go. It's got one too many folds now, I can't tell. It's got folds everywhere. Fold that sort of there. Fold this one sort of there. Okay. It's funny that this is the more fiddly part. You would have thought this would be the easy bit. I mean, if you follow the guides, it probably is. So there we go. That looks great. Doesn't look that good. I'm going to have a look at the manual myself. I'll be right back. As it turns out, it's just one of the more difficult models I've happened to pick. So it's a good example of, you know, how difficult it can be. I mean, we obviously have too much cable here. I don't quite know what I can do about that. Look at that, that would fit nicely in there otherwise. Oh yeah, I'll just put that in there and just leave that cable sticking up through the CD drive. Anyway, you'll have to fiddle with it until you get it to a point where it is acceptable for you. Now, remembering I don't do this for a living. If you're doing this for a living, do it right. If you're just doing it for your own console and you're not too scared of, breaking things, just leave it like that. For the moment, anyway, let's get some soldering done because the soldering iron is just sitting here burning away. So we want to heat up 5-volt pad. Let's go with this one on top here. So just apply some heat to the pad and drop in some solder. You'll see I'm going with this pad because there's no difference. You only need to do one of them and it doesn't matter which one. They all join up. Next, we want to bridge the JVC up the top. So I don't know if I'm going to be closer in on that. Nope. So use your eyesight. Zoom if you need to. Man, this is a lot of flux in it, this solder. So it's joined, not joined. Yep, I unjoined it. It's got too much solder on it, but that's fine. As long as your solder joint makes a join. There we go, that looks better. That looks much better now. Make sure it's not joining with Sanyo. Sanyo would be bad. Okay, so now we have 5-volt connected. We can... Well, let's not attach the red wire yet. Let's turn off the soldering iron just for a little while. And unplug this from the main board. So disconnect, just let it flop down there to the side. Grab all of the cables and pull upward. And it should come loose. And depending on your model, you may have a grounding strap here. So you'll need a smaller Phillips head than the one you used on the external screws. There should also be a little washer. Found that on a lot of the consoles I've added this chip into, that seems to be missing altogether. But that's fine, that's fine. I mean, probably mattered once upon a time. And then you just simply lift it out. And there it is. So now that your CD drive is free, you want to be very careful of the screw and washer you just took out. You don't want to lose them. Like I just did. Where'd they go? They're over there near the kinda. Okay, good. So pop your little, well, Saturns aren't exactly little by nature, but you want to work on the underside of the drive. So that cable you disconnected from here, we want to have a look at. So 5 volts runs in. 5 volt is a pretty common voltage for electronics. These days it's more 3.3. But what we want is the second pin, I believe. So pin 2 is one of these sides. But it doesn't really matter because on the other side is where all the fun happens. I know exactly which pin it is. So when you're placing this down, be careful of the laser, which sits right there. That is actually mechanical, so you don't want to damage it. You also don't want to push down too much on this spindle. You also don't want to put down anything that's staticky. So if you've got any regular bubble wrap that isn't anti-static, don't put it on that. Okay, so where's the thing we're soldering? Let's have a look here. See if I can get in frame and in focus. Okay, so you might be able to see it from there. I'm going to turn the soldering iron back on. Don't know why I turned that off. These pins along here are the ones we want to look at. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of them. Ah. It appears to be above the first pin. That can't be it, it must be the second pin on that side. See, this is why you should always have the manual open. Always refer to the manual. No, that is 5 volt, okay. It's on the first pin. Well, that's not actually on a pin, is it? That's separate to a pin. Anyway, it's the one you want to align it with is this very first one, as I'm looking at it here. So not the one on this side, the one on this side. It's got just one dot above it. You can actually solder to that, which, you know, makes it a bit easier. You don't have to solder. A lot of the time in the past, people would just tuck the wire into the actual Saturn plug, and that would be enough. But these days, we require a bit more from you. So I just add a bit of solder to that. Make sure it's nice and fresh. So these on the underside are probably test points that are there for troubleshooting and diagnostics of the actual Saturn itself. So find your Kynar, which should be around. Here's mine. Work out which direction you want it to go in. Doesn't matter too much, but generally in the direction of where the Modchip's going to sit. So put your wire on, heat your solder. Beautiful. Turn your soldering iron off. And from there it'll run, you know, somewhere. The point is we're done with this side of the drive now. It's that easy. Just one little solder thing. And then we just zoom back out so we can see what the heck I'm doing. Oh, Saturn! Make sure your grounding strap is out of the way. Make sure your little cable, could be red, could be any colour. I've just gone with red because it's a very angry colour. Sort of floating around near the grounding strap, but not actually getting pierced by anything. And don't lose your little cable there either. You don't want to lose either of those. Maybe that's a bit better. So reconnecting this is pretty simple. You just click it in and then you put your screw back in for the grounding strap. And balanced on the screwdriver. Line it up and screw it in. Or miss the screw hole repeatedly until you hit it. There we go. Computers. You know what I'm saying. So you've probably got more Kynar than you need, so you can actually cut it shorter in a moment. In the meantime, just get it the heck out of your way. Okay, fine, stay there, I don't care. And go back to this mess, trying to work out which way this is best positioned. So for me, I'm going to put this Kynar underneath. I'm going to make sure it has enough slack that if it does decide to bounce up one day in the future, it's not going to rip it off either the main board or the chip. So somewhere around there, so you can get that other little bit spare for something. And we want to do the 30 AWG strip. Boom! Very good wire strippers. I used to use scissors myself, but let me tell you, wire strippers, miles better. Make sure your soldering iron's back on. Which mine isn't. So it's heating up. Now you'll want some double-sided tape. I've got double-sided tape with foam in the middle. That's probably best for this particular application. There is also that sort of double-sided tape, which is just double-sided tape. Literally, there's no foam. That's good for Game Boy screens, I found. $3. $3 from the supermarket. Double-sided tape with foam? Don't even ask me. I stole it from downstairs. Okay, soldering iron's heated up. So we just want to simply attach. probably a little bit long, but you can always cut that if you... Ah! Do not forget that the wires will conduct heat very well because electricity and heat are pretty similar. Just gonna have to grin and bear it, I think. Ah. Ow, 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 ow. Alternatively, you could use something to stop the heat transferring. Or just do it a bit quicker. That's a better way. Because I've made that too long, I need a pair of... I actually use nail clippers as my wire cutters when I need a tight spot to be clipped. Make sure the little piece of metal is free of the Saturn. The last thing you want is a little piece of Saturn. You can turn it upside down, just make sure you hold the CD drive. If it went somewhere where you didn't see it. Ah. Good. All is well. So we've got the 5 volt in, we've got the jumper jumpered, we've got the cable connected. I'm still not quite sure about the best way to do this cable routing though. I could almost get it sort of squashed down there and double-sided tape it on. Something else, if you do have it, duct tape. PVC duct tape. Just sort of place it underneath where the chip will land. If you do that, it won't short out anything on the chip. Pretty important. Admittedly, it is mostly just vias on the other side, but why risk it? Why would you risk it? There is no reason to risk it at all. And if your chip's upside down, well, I mean the other way around, depending on the model you've got and which way your cables go, that will also play into it. I'm just going to fiddle around with this for 20 minutes and get some duct tape. I'll be back. Well, I told you I'd be back. So I got some duct tape and I fed the dog while I was down there. So that's pretty good duct tape. PVC variety, so you just get off enough of that. Oh yeah, plenty. Give it a bit of a chop, chop, chop. And sort of try and position it underneath all the metal bits. If you can. So there we go, that's pretty good. And snip, snip, snip. Fold it down over the edge. And I've got a little bit of overlap here. Just a couple of things into it. I can fold that down. Marvelous. And you've got a little bit left over, so go over any little bits that you don't want to have being metal and awfully conductive, such as that bit there. And on the other side we've got much of the same. So do the same. There we go, that looks good. And then you just got to find a way. Now you can secure this down with double-sided tape if you wish. I'm not going to for the moment. I'm going to give it always a good idea to give it a test first. If you are testing it, I'd recommend putting on the lid. So just make sure it doesn't bounce away. But here's the lid. and I'm going to hook that into power. So
we'll be right back in another video. Stay tuned.